An editor in New York City knew that I was living in Oaxaca, Mexico, and she said, oh, there's these two brothers, they're crazy and very fun, that have a new publishing house in Mexico City. And she gave me their correo electrónico, and I had it for months. And then I found the piece of paper and I was like, oh yeah. Oh, and I'm going to be going to Mexico City. So I wrote them, and then I contacted Eduardo, and we met on the street near the Estatua de Ángel, and I gave him one of my books, and we talked a little bit, and then we met the next day, and he was like, oh, I want to publish your work. So it was a very fortunate meeting that's turned into now 4 books. First, because I have a daughter, and my wife and I wanted her to learn a second language, and Spanish is a perfect choice after Mandarin Chinese. And so we looked around for different places that we might live. We decided, since we're living in a big city, New York, to live somewhere that was smaller. And we went to Spain, and it seemed like very expensive. And we thought, well, we're not going to be. It wouldn't be Mexico City because it's just too much of a repeat of New York. And we'd visited Oaxaca a couple of times and liked it, but really didn't know it, and just picked it out of. It was just a lucky guess, and it turned out to be so perfect. But it was at a time in 2006 when we were in the second term of George Bush as president, and we very much wanted escape, este gobernador, and presidente. So we arrived in Oaxaca thinking we were going to get away from it all in a small town, just in time for the PFP to arrive and have this exploding situation there with the Manifestación de las Maestras, which turned out to be, I realized I wasn't trying to escape, I just wanted something else. And I draw about political topics all the time, and so this was an opportunity to explore a completely different culture, but still political, and get the influence of the art of Oaxaca and Mexico in general. And I found it's turned my mind in so many different directions that I'm still in the process of digesting the information. Well, I can't help myself. Wherever I am, I want to draw the circumstances and my experience, and it's my way of experiencing where I am. And drawing in my sketchbook has been a good way to do art without any sense of where I'm going to sell it or the commerce of it. It's just personal. And so I've been recording my time in New York since I got there over 30 years ago. And so I have in a certain way been working on this book for 30 years. But then when I got back from Mexico, I'd spent so much time drawing in my sketchbook, then I continued to do that. Only now I was drawing New York with the influences of Oaxaca, and that created a different view of New York for me. And I was talking to Sexto Piso about the possibility of the next book being continuing the Diario Idea, and that was with Nueva York. And so then I looked at all the different work I created over that time, but I also started creating new work, and I spent 3 years drawing in my sketchbook all the time and looking at what I had and seeing what was missing from the picture that I wanted to create that would demonstrate how I feel about New York, which is a very large spectrum of sometimes very dark things and sometimes, I hope, beautiful. Well, in a certain way, that was one of the connections that I saw between, there's a lot of things that are not the same. Obviously, Oaxaca is a small town, and it's very old, and New York is newer and huge. But the graffiti was definitely one of the things that connected it. You know, groups like Arte Jaguar and Asaro, and these amazing, beautiful, all this beautiful street art that was responding to what was happening politically. I felt completely related to it, and that was one of the aspects of being in Oaxaca, the way people were using art to express themselves with these political themes. Was here I was in another place where people felt the same urgency to use art that way, and so I just felt a great association with it, and it was very inspiring. Well, it had. I also did something in Diario de Oaxaca, my other book, that was about the smells of Oaxaca. The smell right after there's a cojete or a dead animal or food on the street, and the way that kind of, it was very much part of the experience. And I'd like to think the sounds and the smells are part of what ends up in the drawings, and that what you see in Diario de Nueva York and también in Diario de Oaxaca is when I was drawing on the street, there was the impact of it being a hot day and maybe me not comfortable, and somebody walks in front of my drawing, and that it was these changes and other influences that makes the drawings more complicated than they would ever be if I sat down and looked at a photograph and tried to copy it, which never has any of that in it. It was a challenge. It was also a welcome opportunity to apply what I was doing in Oaxaca in my sketchbook, and then do it in illustration, and spend a period of time, with material like that, because it's such a classic. And it also, interestingly, there's a subtext that's political. The original book had the artist John Tenniel drew the political figures of his time as the characters, and so it was a perfect opportunity for me to then use current political figures. So the rabbit, if you look closely, looks a little bit like Clinton, President Clinton, or the gato is Richard Nixon, who was a president in the United States, and he kind of faded away, but he came back. And Ronald Reagan makes an appearance, and so does Dick Cheney, and the Mad Hatter fit just too perfectly with George Bush. So I was able to bring some of those aspects in, so that I, again, felt like I was talking about the current times. But it wasn't important to me, actually, if you looked at the book and didn't know who they were. It gave it sort of a quality of a real person. And if you recognize it, great, and if you don't, it gives it a deeper quality. But it was really enjoyable to spend long periods of time with those characters, because the writing is so beautiful. It's such great language, and the story is so fantastic. And it's a book that everybody should read, and it was a real gift to be able to examine it that way. And I had a couple of summers where that's what I did.